Hello, I am Kaitlyn McNally. I am a registered dietitian with Cornell Cooperative Extension, Niagara County, under the Sodium Reduction in Communities Program grant with the Center of Disease Control. Today, we're going to talk about how to lower sodium in your menus through homemade marinade and dressings. So you must be asking, why are we talking about sodium today? According to the 2020-2025 Dietary Guidelines for Americans, the current intake for children ages 2 to 4 is over 2,000 milligrams of sodium per day. According to the recommendation for this age group, it's only around 1,200 milligrams per day. Eating too much sodium is associated with high blood pressure and an increased risk of heart disease and stroke. And this even goes for children and teens. Most of the sodium that we consume comes from processed and pre-packaged foods. So one way to lower the sodium in our diet and through the meals that we prepare for our children is through homemade cooking. So that's why today we're going to talk about homemade marinades and dressings. The sodium content in store-bought dressings can be very high. For example, balsamic vinaigrette contains about 270 milligrams of sodium for only 2 tablespoons. So the sodium throughout the day can add up very quickly, especially when the recommendation is only 1,500 milligrams for children. Italian dressing is a really common flavorful marinade for raw chicken. However, the sodium can add up and be around 220 milligrams per serving. Providing our children with heart-healthy marinades and dressings is a great way to introduce a variety of flavors and foods to the menu. All right, so today we have Chef Emily joining us to teach us a little bit on how to make marinades and dressings from scratch. This is going to be really crucial to reduce the sodium in your menu. So, Chef Emily, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Chef Emily Lonigan. I'm the Director of Community Education at the Niagara Falls Culinary Institute. And I'm super excited to work on this project with Kaitlyn to help reduce sodium in all of your kitchens.
Well, thanks for joining us. So, let's get started. Before we get started on the recipe demonstration, Chef is going to tell us a little bit about the equipment that we need to make these marinades and dressings in your kitchen.
So these are very basic tools that you probably already have in your kitchen. We're going to start with a nice sharp knife, a cutting board that's secured with a wet paper towel or a chick towel underneath it. I've got a microplane here for citrus zest, and we're using today a stand blender. If you have an immersion blender or a stick blender, that's perfectly fine. A food processor will work just as well. Or if you don't have any of those, a nice stiff whisk in a big bowl suffices pretty well.
That's great. So really we know that the staff has this equipment available and they can start right away.
Absolutely.
Let's wash our hands and we'll get started. Before we get to our recipe demonstration, this is a reminder that prior to cooking, it is important to start off with proper hand washing, a clean work area, and clean utensils. All right, so what is the first step to making a marinade?
So today we're going to use ingredients that I'm sure you already have in your kitchen. Generally, when you're starting out with a marinade, you're making a vinaigrette. So what we're going to do is start with 3 parts oil to 1 part acid. You can use any kind of acid you want. We're using apple cider vinegar today. This is one of the most commonly found acids in a kitchen, but you can also use lemon juice, any kind of vinegar, including balsamic, or if you just have citrus juice in a carton, that's totally doable as well. So today we're going to start with 1.5 cups of vegetable oil and a 1/2 cup of apple cider vinegar. That's a 3-to-1 ratio. So we're just going to pour this in, and then I'll add a 1/2 cup here. And then this goes directly into our blender here. So I'm going to take this off. and drop this in here. Other ingredients, this is the base. So you can start working with flavor profiles in anything you want. Anything you have in your kitchen, in your fridge, anything left over, bits of vegetables, ends of herbs, things like that, it's all perfect for marinades. So today we're just going to use a little bit of garlic powder, just a couple shakes in here, and some lemon zest to just add in a little bit of extra zing. We've got some zing from the apple cider vinegar, but this is going to add a nice, fresh, bright, summery flavor. This would also be delicious with basil. Lemon and basil is a game changer in terms of chicken or tofu. This is the perfect way to get a nice, bright, summery thing to put in front of your clients. We're going to use a little bit of parsley as well. You can just twist off the ends. If you've got some stems in here, that's totally fine. We've got a very powerful blender. So we can just chuck this all in here, whiz it up. After this, taste for seasoning and adjust as you see fit.
Wow, that was so easy and really time efficient. That didn't take any time at all. But it's great because the options are endless. You can use lemon, you can use oranges, limes, and then the different vinegars such as apple cider or balsamic, and then the fresh herbs and dry herbs. Really, you can make it customized and increase the variety in your menu, even if sometimes the proteins remain pretty consistent. And it's great. I mean, you can really just add it as you go along. You may not even need a recipe.
Absolutely. And there are tons of flavor profiles that you can use from all around the world. If you wanted to use a little bit of sesame oil, some ginger and garlic, there's a nice Asian marinade right away. And any sort of basil, oregano, rosemary, Italian, boom, done. You chuck a little Parmesan cheese in there, add a little bit of umami to the marinade, and then that will make your kids super happy.
That is awesome. Yeah, adding different cultures and ethnicities is really popular these days, especially at early childhood, because we want to introduce them to these different flavor profiles at a young age. So it's really good to know that we can adjust even from each menu cycle throughout the school
Oh,
year.
definitely. Yes. And this is a really easy way to introduce new flavor profiles to kids, because if it's on something that they already recognize, like chicken breast, they're more likely to eat it and learn about the new flavor profiles.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we made the marinade. So let's talk about the proteins that we're going to use with the marinade. So what are some proteins that you recommend?
So I love marinating chicken, grilling it. Beef and fish also work very well. And if you have vegetarian kids, tofu is a perfect protein for marinating. It's essentially a sponge, so it will soak up all of the flavors that you're using in your marinade really, really well.
I love the tofu option because there are a lot more vegetarian kids that are coming into schools now, and we want to provide them variety as well and want to make similar menu options to those who are non-vegetarian.
Absolutely, and you can usually use the flavor profile in your marinade that you made the first time as long as it has vegetarian ingredients in it. So I'm just going to demonstrate how you could do this so that you could have vegetarian marinated proteins on hand in case you had a vegetarian kid. So I'm just going to, this is extra firm tofu that's already been drained. I'm just going to turn this out. And I'm just going to cut this into about 1/2 inch slabs. So this cuts very nicely and smoothly. And you'll see that it's got a really nice porous texture here, so it'll really soak up the marinade. Generally, you want to marinate your proteins from anywhere from 2 hours to about overnight. If you're doing something like this, where you want to do it in the freezer, almost indefinitely is how long you can marinate this. So I'm just laying these pieces of tofu in this large Ziploc bag, and then I'm just going to pour the marinade in it and then squeeze out all the air bubbles and put this in the freezer.
It's great that these are already individualized, because then you can just, put it on the grill or the stovetop real quick, or even bake the tofu and then put it in a sandwich, a wrap, or even on a salad for a vegetarian child. So that's perfect. And the fact that the flavor profile is the same as what the other kids are getting, then they're not going to feel, different or out of place because they're getting a different meal.
Absolutely. And also for non-vegetarian kids, this is still a lovely protein option. This if you used a Mexican flavor profile, you could crumble this up and use this in addition to or in place of regular ground beef. With the flavor profile and a nice serious marinade, the kids might not even know.
Exactly. And then back to the marinating the proteins. Like you said, I mean, a minimum of 2 hours, but then also overnight. I mean, that's such a great way to create efficiency within the kitchen. The kitchen staff can marinate the protein the day before. We know they're really busy the day of trying to get breakfast served. So then all they have to do is take the pre-marinated chicken or other protein option and bake it off, and there you go, lunch is ready.
Oh, yes. Also, this is great for big batch making. So if you wanted to do a lot of proteins for, say, a month cycle, you could divide it up, put it in the freezer, pull it out the day before, and then you've got marinated proteins ready to go.
Oh, that's awesome. That's such a good tip. And obviously, a Ziploc bag is kind of small, but then translating and doing it in maybe a bigger square tub or container, then you're not, you're just being efficient and doing that batch marinating at one time. So we talked about marinating our proteins and creating those. So how does that translate into a dressing? Salads are really common on our menu cycles. So what can we include or make from scratch that's easy, efficient, and flavorful?
So generally, any marinade like this, a vinaigrette-based marinade, this is good to transfer directly into a dressing. If you'd like to make it creamier or more ranch style, you could certainly use this same base recipe and then add yogurt or low-fat sour cream to really make this a nice creamy dressing. Again, all flavor profiles are included in any of this. Even with some pre-made spice blends, makes a lovely dressing when added to oil and acid.
That's awesome, because once again, we're increasing the flavor that we're introducing to the students. So what about when the seasons change? How do you translate different dressings to maybe make something a little bit more summery or fruitful?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially this time of year, we've got berries out the wazoo. So especially if they're starting to go a little bit, starting to lose some of their juices, that's perfect for a dressing or a marinade, because you can just throw it right in the blender. There's no waste. You're using up some stuff that would have gone to the garbage in the first place, but now we can incorporate that to a new flavor profile.
Oh, that's great, because then we're not even throwing away food or creating food waste, which is a huge priority for our kitchens, because that's dollars lost as well. So I think the students would really love like a berry vinaigrette, because they like that sweet flavor.
Absolutely. That's a good way to introduce, again, more different flavor profiles to kids. Sweet is one of their most favorite things. So that's the perfect way to put it on more vegetables so they can eat those.
Yeah, absolutely. And it reduces the sodium because you're making it yourself. And, once again, we're not just resorting to ranch every single time, but, we're doing a berry vinaigrette that's easy, that the students will really love. All right, so we talked about our proteins. So how can we use these marinades and dressings with vegetables?
Vegetables are incredible sponges for marinade. Things that are nice and porous, like zucchini or summer squash. Mushrooms soak up marinades perfectly well, and you can roast them or grill them. And anything that you have left over can certainly be used as a basting oil or a nice sauce while you're roasting or grilling, just to keep the vegetables nice and flavorful and really bright and summery.
That's great. Yeah, one of my favorite combinations is sliced Brussels sprouts and letting them soak in a little bit of balsamic vinaigrette and then roasting them, and then they get really nicely caramelized, and there's a really great flavor.
Yeah, there's a lot of texture and flavor contrast in that dish already, and plus it gets kids to eat Brussels sprouts.
Right. We want them to try to, introduce and try new foods. So hopefully by using these techniques and these different flavors that you talked about, then it can really encourage our students to try these new foods.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Chef Emily, for being here today and teaching us how to make these dressings and marinades from scratch to make our menus and meals healthier overall. I think the students are going to love this, and it just makes it so less intimidating learning from someone else and knowing that our nutrition staff can do this in their kitchen, and it's really applicable and efficient, and you guys can make healthier meals for your students. And thank you so much for all the tips.
My pleasure.